Talk about the importance of volume when you're emailing college coaches. When I say volume, I just mean the amount of emails that you are sending to college coaches. Because a lot of times I'll talk to parents and they put 20 or 30 schools on a target list, not knowing that it's probably just not enough. And I'm going to show you why. Now, you have to remember that when you're emailing college coaches, this is a cold email. A cold email is when the recipient doesn't know that you are about to email them. Right? They are just chilling on a Tuesday and you're sending an email that invades their inbox out of nowhere, right? And so the reply rate is going to be significantly lower than it would be on a regular email, okay? So because of that, you're going to get way less responses, which means you need to send way more emails if you want to get responses from college coaches. If you're sending 10, 20, 30 emails and not getting the kind of interest that you want, sure, it could be that your subject line is bad. It could be that your email is bad. It could be that there's things in your email that are hurting your chances. It could be that your video is bad. There's a lot of things that it could be, but it also could be that you just haven't sent enough of them. And I'm going to show you what this looks like and why this can be the case. So we're going to say sending emails to 20 emails specifically to college coaches is not enough. And basic math is what is preventing you from getting a scholarship. I will prove it to you, and you can double check my math, okay? So let's say you email 20 schools. You put 20 schools on a target list. You're like, hey, these are schools I would potentially be interested in. Awesome, okay? Now, right off the bat, at least 50% of those schools probably don't need your position in grad class, right? College coaches recruit based on need. They look at their roster and they say, who's graduating, who's hurt, who's leaving, who has been disqualified academically, right? They're looking at their roster. They decide who they need, what positions, what grad classes, and then they go recruit those players. So 50% of the schools that you're emailing just probably don't need your position in grad class right off the bat. So without talking about anything else, literally nothing else, automatically you have to cut the number of schools that you email in half. So if we email 20 schools, we're going to say 10 of those are actually viable. But it gets worse, okay? Let's assume that you get an 80% open rate, which is generous, okay? Most players who are sending emails are not getting 80% open rates, but for the sake of this argument, let's say that it's being pretty generous, and you get an 80% open rate. We average 88%, industry average is much lower. We're gonna say 80%. That means that out of those 10 viable schools, 8 of them will open your email. So 2 of them, forget about those. They never even saw the email, okay? So now we're down to 8 schools out of the original 20 that we started with, but there's still more to go, okay? About half of the coaches are gonna watch your video. Half of them will, half of them won't. So we have to throw out half of those schools. So if we're down to 8, right, half of 8 is 4. So that means 4 out of the 8 schools are actually going to watch your video and evaluate you, okay? 4, and we started with 20, and we're already down to 4, but we're not done yet. Typically, when a player emails a school, right, when you put together your list of 20 or 30 target schools, typically those are the players' like favorite schools. Like, hey, these are the ones that I'm really interested in. And so a lot of times that list is going to contain schools that are reach schools, schools that the kid is maybe not fully capable of playing at yet, schools where you're like, it'd be really nice to go there, but I think it's a bit of a stretch, right? Schools like that. So because of that, those schools are probably not likely to respond, so we have to cut this number down even more because there's a really, 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 really high chance that there are schools on your list that are reach schools. So because of that, we got to cut it down. Now, generally, you should account for a minimum of 50% of schools believing that your kid is not good enough for their program because most people overestimate their kids' abilities. They just do. So we have to account for that. Now, I'm saying 50%. To be honest with you, 75% is more accurate based on the families that I talk to. But we're going to use 50% because we're being generous. So we got to take the 4 schools that we're down to, and again, we have to cut it in half. So what are we left with? We're left with 2 schools out of the 20 that you emailed. 2 schools that need your position in grad class, that opened your email, they watched your video, they evaluated you, and they actually think you're good enough for their school. So out of the 20, we got 2 schools interested. That's a 10% reply rate. That is average. So in the recruiting process, a 10% reply rate would be average. Players will get a little bit less. Players will get more than that, about 10%. Here's where it gets dicey though. is if you're wrong about any of those numbers, if you're wrong about schools needing your position in grad class, instead of half of them, what if 60% of them don't need your position in grad class? Or what about your open rate? What if it's not 80%? What if it's 70 or 60%? What about watching your video? What if it's not 50%? What if it's 40 or 30%, right? And we just keep going down the line. We were being pretty generous with those numbers. If those numbers aren't as good as we said that they were, there's a really good chance that your 20 emails go to zero almost immediately, right? Where you're getting responses. You're getting basically nothing. And it's not weird when this happens. It's just math, right? We have to actually do the math. We have to confront reality and say, what is the reality of the situation? We can hear other people talk about email and say, oh, it's really important, and buy someone's email template and say, okay, great. Now at least we have a template. Like, you have to confront reality. What is the reality of the situation? Otherwise, you're just going to be sending emails into the abyss, and you're not going to get any interest, and you're going to say, the recruiting process is rigged, it's against me. It's not. It's not against you. You just have to play with math. Like, you have to do with math. You have to confront the reality of the situation. And there are always going to be exceptions. You're going to hear about players who send 10 emails and get 5 responses. That's great. If you're the exception to the rule, you probably don't even need to watch this video. Good for you. But you're probably not the exception to this rule if you're watching this video, because you likely don't have the amount of interest in offers that you're hoping for, right? So you're probably not the exception to the rule. So you need both quantity and quality. You need both of them. You need to send a large amount of emails because this is cold email, and naturally you're going to get a lower reply rate. And you have to have high quality, because if you don't have a high quality email, then you're not going to get replies anyway. So you can't have one or the other. You need both of them, right? Otherwise, you're really just wasting your time, right? Sending emails is just not going to do anything for you, and you're going to be like, why am I not getting responses? This is why, right? This is why, and you're going to end up with little interest in offers. This is why people hire us, right? Because we can take the work off their plate and we can ensure it's done properly. I can go send 100 emails for a kid, and it's much easier for us to do that because we have a whole system in place to do this, and we'll ensure that it's done properly because we've sent so many at this point. We know what works and what doesn't, right? And so it's just a cheat code to the recruiting process. That's why people pay a lot of money and hire us. You don't have to do that if you don't want to do it. You can do it on your own. But you need both quality and quantity. And if you're not willing to do that, then you probably should hire us, right? You have to send a ton of emails, and they have to be really, really good if you want to use email as your primary method of exposure. Now, if you want to use a different method as your primary method of exposure, like social media, that's going to come with its own set of challenges, right? Now you need the algorithm to pick it up, which is going to be much harder because your kid probably has like 300 followers or 1,000 followers. And so now it's not really predictable. You may get one video that pops off, but what if that never happens? What happens when you're tagging coaches? You're going to tag like 5 of them? You're going to tag like 30 of them? I don't know. So there's lots of other problems that are going to come with social media. Or what if you're going to have your coach reach out to coaches on behalf of for you, right? Are they going to reach out to 100 of them? Probably not. They got lots of other kids on your team that they've promised stuff to. Are they going to reach out to 100 just for you? Probably not. So they're probably only going to reach out to 5, so it's not going to get you mass exposure. I'm not going to keep going down the line because we could talk about this forever, and that's not the point of this video. The point is that every method of getting exposure in the recruiting process has its own set of challenges. You cannot ignore those challenges. You have to confront reality. Like, what's the reality of the situation? And with email, the reality of the situation is that you have to send a lot of them, and you have to send good ones. Otherwise, you're just not going to get interest from college coaches. Okay. There's lots of other videos on the YouTube channel. If you like this video, then go watch a few others, and I'll talk to you guys soon.